Welcome to episode 4 of the Real Estate Investing Advisors podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about how to evaluate return on investment, or ROI for short, for a short-term rental. Let me mention that this topic can be kind of complicated because there's so many moving parts. It's not just black and white. When we were doing long-term rentals in Atlanta, it pretty much was black and white. You have a single family home that's 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms in a certain neighborhood, and you knew what your monthly rent could be. This is so different. So we're going to talk about so many different things, probably, and may not even be able to cover everything in this short time. So let's get started. And let me also mention, we are coming to you today from our home studio, our home. So again, if you're watching on YouTube, we do apologize if you see any furry friends in the camera or hear any noises. Charlie's lurking on the floor right now. So anyway, just we apologize in advance. All right, let's get started. I get a lot of questions when I'm showing property. What size property is the best for rental? Meaning, should I buy a 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom? And I'm going to come back to lifestyle, as I mentioned in the previous podcast, because lifestyle is really going to drive what you're going to purchase for what you and your family need today. Again, as mentioned in the previous podcast, budget is going to play a big factor. Assuming we're going to be within your budget and within your lifestyle, that's where it's going to depend on 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. And I would always turn my clients over to Michael when we were running the rental company, and even now, to talk about what kind of property is better. He's going to give you a perspective. I'm going to give you a perspective. There's no right or wrong. There's different ways to evaluate the the return on investment, which we'll kind of go into a little bit further. So I'm going to turn this over to Michael and have him kind of explain maybe the initial top couple of questions that he would get from guests whenever they would rent, because a lot of what the guest needs is what's going to drive the income.
And the lifestyle that she's talking about does drive the investment, because for the most part, these are second homes, vacation homes that work for their family. And when I have other agents, when I was running the rental company, they would come to me and they'd say, hey, I have a client. We've already kind of narrowed it down to these 3 or 4, whatever. And they're curious from your perspective, which one would generate better income, which one's kind of a better investment. I always looked at it from the perspective of the numbers, so the revenue. So because I was renting a lot of these and I had a wide variety of studio, 1 bedroom, all the way up to a 10 bedroom. So I had a really good feel over the years for where the revenue was great. But the top questions were always, how close is it to the beach, which nobody asked when it was Gulf Front. And the second one that always came up was effectively asking about the bed configurations. This is what Debbie calls heads and beds. So for years, and I'm sure this is true in so many markets, they always talk about heads and beds. So whether it's a 3 bedroom or a 5 bedroom, they talk about the potential number it sleeps. And that can generate and that can dictate what the revenue will look like, because it'll change the complexion of the person or the families that are renting that particular unit. So that's a deciding factor. But the overarching, as you can imagine, with the beach is how close is it to the beach? And specifically, the moms would ask me, how many steps is it to the beach? So if it wasn't Gulf Front, even if it was Gulf Front, they'd ask, how many steps down to the ground? So it got that literal, because half the time they were talking about their 5 or 6 or 7-year-old, and they wanted to figure out exactly how much pain they were going to have to go through to get the kid to the beach. And that proximity also to go back for lunch, to go back for whatever reasons. And that dictates. And then there's a second thing, right? Now you're talking about school schedules. So outside of school schedules, the closer to the beach you are, the more likely you end up getting those bookings, simply because people are coming to the beach for a reason. They want to go on the beach. So if it's outside of school schedules, the revenue, the rates go down, because you're trying to get, those people that can come either homeschool their kids or they don't have kids. So now you talk about the dynamic where it becomes, okay, like, oh, wow, that's why the studios and the one bedrooms will rent more year round. They're kind of like hotel rooms. And the closer they are to the beach, the more you get those bookings. So that complexity, and what Debbie was talking about, is there's no one simple answer because it starts to get into the detail of each unit. So even if you have an X bedroom, the next question becomes, does it have a community pool? Where is the community pool in relation to that particular unit that you're buying in that particular, say, condo or whatnot? And then Debbie can tell you, from years of doing this, the neighborhoods, right? Seaside, et cetera.
Correct. And let me back up a second. If you're not in a community with a community pool, you really want to be or have a private pool. And so just know, because we have so much more inventory, that the competition is that much greater. Let's just say you're in Seagrove, where there aren't technically the planned developments. Yes, there are developments. There's a lot of homes on, I'm going to call them side streets, that are great rentals, yet you really want to have a pool, because if there's, let's say, a purple flag one day at the beach,
which means marine life, then somebody may not go to the beach. They'll go hang out at the pool. And again, those are certain things to think about. The other thing with school schedules, at the end of the year, we average 24 to 26 weeks of rental per year. In the off season, it may be 3, 4, 5 night stays. Typically during spring break and summer, it's 7 nights. This year it was a little looser just because so many people were traveling to Europe, and everybody knows rental rates were down a little bit this year. And a lot of the rental companies loosened up the 7 night stays to 4 or 5 night stays. And just know that our market is seasonal. There's a lot of seasonality to it, as is, let's say, the ski markets. And so there's going to be times where your property's not rented. This is not, again, a long-term rental. Let's just say maybe short-term rentals aren't for everybody. I know somebody who will only do long-term rentals. We've gotten to a point where we used to do long-term rentals in Atlanta, and now we'll only do short-term rentals, and for different reasons. No right or wrong. It just depends on what you're looking for. Michael, tell everybody what else is important for ROI as far as in the home, east side versus west end of 30A. West end of 30A has grown so much that it's really not necessarily as big of a difference. I'd say Seaside's gotten busy. A lot of people do like the planned developments. We would get a lot of guests who used to go into Seaside come down to Rosemary. A lot of people like the planned developments where you can walk and bike everywhere. Once you've gone to the grocery store, you don't have to get in your car. Seacrest Beach sits in between Alice Beach and Rosemary Beach. And there is a dichotomy between Rosemary and Seacrest in Seacrest Beach, even though they were right next door to each other. A 3-bedroom in Rosemary Beach or a 4-bedroom in Rosemary would rent, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe double of what was Seacrest Beach, because it is Rosemary Beach. Again, if somebody couldn't afford Rosemary, they'd go to Seacrest, and yet you still can use, well, you can't use the amenities, but you still have all the shops and restaurants right next door. And that's the reason why you would tell people, if you have the opportunity, come down and stay as a renter first, so you can understand why there's such a massive price difference. Even when you could just throw a tennis ball over a fence and hit a 4-bedroom that's the same square footage as the 4-bedroom in the other community, yet the prices could be double, both for the house and for the weekly rents. And it is very difficult to try and explain this to somebody who's never stayed here. It always worked out a lot better if somebody's been coming for years and they kind of understand, they kind of get it, because there is such a huge differential between the planned developments she's talking about, like the Seasides, the Rosemarys, and there's even other ones like Watercolor, et cetera, that dictate, and they have a little bit of a higher price per square foot. They also have higher rents. And a lot of times it comes down to the community amenities, the restaurants that happen to be in those communities or right on the edges of those communities. So there's a lot of those factors that come into play that dictate what the real estate is. Now, this is no different. If you're in certain markets and you go over a county line and it's one school system versus the other, you probably already understand how that can dictate the prices of the houses. It's no different here with the rents. So even though you're the same distance to the beach, the difference is what amenities are within that one community versus the other community. And that will dictate tremendously, in some cases, what the prices, not only of the homes, but also the prices that you can charge per weekly rent. Those are big differences.
The good news is there's no right or wrong. Again, wherever you purchase, there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. It does come down to lifestyle. We just want everybody to be aware of the differences and some of the tips and tricks to help maximize ROI and really what to look for. Okay, so we know we're at a beach. We're at the beach town. Proximity to the beach is number one. Heads and beds is another one. Give everybody some other tips about what helps a home or a condo rent better than maybe the house next door.
So you're talking about from the rental perspective, like I want to stay for a moment on the heads and beds, right? So Debbie has for years suggested to clients, and I can tell you from a rental perspective, this makes a huge difference. If you've got, let's just say, a 3-bedroom and one of the bedrooms is set up for the kids, let's just say it's 4 bunk beds. The other 2 bedrooms, you have a king. The other bedroom, you have a queen. So you have 2 adult type rooms. Debbie has suggested, and I have suggested over the years, that if you can fit reasonably a king into that queen, get rid of the queen and put a king in there. And the reason is if you have 2 families that book that room that might have 2 kids and all 4 kids are going to be in the bunk room, now you don't have 2 couples fighting over who gets the queen or the king. And that will dictate what gets booked over another one. So if there's another 3-bedroom just down the street in the same community, it's going to get booked if it's got the 2 kings. I mean, I saw this over and over and over again over the years about how much of a difference that makes. And it is true. And I don't want to spend all my time talking about betting, but this is stuff that you have to plan through. You have to think through. One, with the realtor, if you're looking at certain floor plans, because you can't fit this into every single floor plan. And then secondly, like with the rental company, to make sure that you're maximizing it, because you still have to do it based on how many bathrooms are there. So there is a ratio that you have to really look at. But in the end, it's proximity to beach, heads and beds, and then amenities. So that, to what Debbie was talking about earlier, community amenities are huge. We had a Gulfront townhome complex that every single time the mom asked me, Michael, I don't see any picture of a pool.
Because there was none.
10 years. That mom never booked the property because they had a younger one that they wanted to be able to just go down to the pool with. And that was the reason why they wanted. So we tended to see that townhome, even though it was only 2 bedrooms, it was older kids in the families. And that changed the dynamic, right? So, and it absolutely changed the type of person that would book that property because there was no community pool versus other condos that were Gulfront, et cetera. And they may have had a little bit of a higher rate that they could charge because there was always that community pool that they could fall back on. So those little things make a huge difference. And for reselling the property itself down the road, but more importantly, for an ongoing revenue, it makes a big difference. And that's true with the communities where there may be just 1 pool for a community versus another community that might have 2 or 3 pools throughout the community with the same number of houses. That changes the complexion.
Also, in the past years, many communities, I know Alice, Seacrest, and Rosemary have banned golf carts for guests, and probably more on as you head further west, they are allowed. Just know that if that's kind of the lifestyle that you want to have when you're on vacation, you can't rent a golf cart and stay in Rosemary Beach.
And the security watches for people that are coming from outside those communities. As soon as they see a golf cart coming in, security's all over them. They won't even let you park there and go to the restaurants.
Let me also mention, though, within those communities, rather than a golf cart, everybody has bikes. And so if you don't have bicycles, that is also that's an amenity that really needs to be at the properties. Over the years, there used to be maybe 1 bike shop, which was Big Daddy's in Blue Mountain Beach. And now there's a ton of bike shops who rent bikes. Most people expect when they rent a home to have bikes because you'll see everybody biking to the beach and biking really around town.
So this is where you were asking what makes a difference, Michael. And my conversation with the owner that is purchasing a property, it's like anything you could do that will prevent the guest from having to stuff it or attach it to their SUV on the way down is a huge benefit for booking. It will drive revenue for you. So if you have an area to put, backpack beach chairs and umbrellas, a wagon to get the stuff down to the beach, bikes for the family, like all of these things matter. They all generate extra revenue. Some of the owners are like, I don't want to deal. I was like, it could end up being an extra $3,000 to $4,000 a year or more, depending on which community you're in, because you're providing amenities for that specific property that others don't have. So all those drive revenue. One of the ones that we embraced very early on in our rental company, and we tried to get owners to convert to it, is for whatever reason, this area versus other areas of Florida don't have as many pet-friendly rentals. It's kind of surprised us when we decided to go outside the area and found how many other areas have massive numbers of pet-friendly options compared to our specific area. So we figured out very early on that the pet-friendly rentals really had a higher revenue. Not only can you charge a little bit more for the house, but you could have a non-refundable pet fee that is charged per pet. Some owners were freaking out because they thought every single one would bring 10 dogs with them. And that's not the case. Sometimes not even half the year there's a pet there because it's a nice property. It has other amenities. But the ones that want it for the pet-friendly reasons, not only does it generate more revenue because you can charge a little bit more than one that doesn't, because there's fewer options for the folks that have the pets. The second reason is you'll get off-season bookings where you're one of the few options out there that has the pet-friendly option. So we've had couples bring a dog and book 3 bedrooms, even though they don't need 3 bedrooms, because they liked the property. It was pet-friendly and it was within their budget, and they booked it. And we saw the year-round factor occur, like for snowbirds, et cetera, that want to bring their dogs down. So you get this, all of a sudden you're now getting winter bookings where people aren't even going to the beach, but they just want to get out of Canada or Michigan. They want to come down for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, et cetera. And now they have an option because they can bring Fido. So the pet friendly was a huge, and in fact, back to Debbie's point earlier, for us, I always told owners the trifecta is close to the beach with a private pool, and it's pet friendly. And then if you add in a heated pool on top of it, that fourth factor, that thing will rent almost year round. I mean, it's remarkable what a difference that makes. But the pet friendly private pool close to the beach, those right there are massive upticks. Like you're pretty much like you'd have to try to screw that up effectively.
Let me throw a little, there's an asterisk in there. Most condos do not allow guests to bring pets. Owners can bring pets. And so if you want to buy a condo and you have a dog, 99% of the time you can bring your dog, guests cannot. Most people understand that when they do rent and they're in a condo, that you can't bring a dog.
Right. And that's where I said private pool. That's really a house, right? So that was where I was going with that. And even before the pandemic, the private pools, even if it wasn't pet friendly, the private pools were unbelievable the way that they would book more. Everybody just wants to be able to like have their coffee out in the morning and go out there and sit, even if they're not in the pool. If it's a heated pool, they, year round, you've got the option now to actually rent a property where it's going to get used. If it's a sunny day and if it's a little bit cool, you might not go down to the beach, but you've got that one setting. To Debbie's point earlier, if it's a purple flag and it's marine life, now you've got an option to be able to actually still have a great, enjoyable experience because you've got that private pool.
Let me mention too that in a lot of communities, a lot of these lots don't allow for a private pool. And that's okay because a lot of people don't expect to have private pools. Let's say in Rosemary and Seacrest Beach, for example, there are a handful of homes that have private pools. Most of them don't. So now it's the proximity to the community pools. Keep that in mind. Just because you don't have a private pool doesn't mean the home's not going to rent. Again, there's other factors involved that it's kind of complicated. If you are not in a planned development and you're in, let's say, Seacrest, not Seacrest Beach, but Seacrest, there's a bunch of side streets, you want to have a private pool. That's where you really will hurt yourself if you don't.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, the reality is a lot of these communities that have a community pool that serves as the alternative if there's marine life. So we had plenty of properties that didn't have a private pool that rented really well, and the ones that rented really well were the ones that had a community pool.
Something else I want to mention that was, believe it or not, one of the top 5 questions that Michael would get from a rental perspective, and maybe I'm changing topics here. This was important, though, to some people. Are there TVs in every room? And we don't watch TV. And so to us, it was just kind of crazy. You're one of the most beautiful beaches in the country. Why do you want kids to be watching TV? On a rainy day, okay, we get it. It was so important that on our website, we even had the dimensions and the size of the TVs.
Every single TV. And not only dimensions, was it a Roku? Did it have this? Did it have that? Was it Amazon Fire? I mean, people wanted to get to the nitty gritty of like, okay, my kids are going to want to do this, this, and this, hook up their Wii, their Xbox, etc. Like everything, like your point, it's the beach. But in reality, the moms are still dealing with kids that want to stay connected. So how fast is the Wi-Fi? On and on. So all the things that can make it super convenient for an experience if it's a rainy day at the beach, all of that stuff mattered. We did have an owner that had this idea that they were only going to have a TV in the living room. And I was like, you're going to prevent so many bookings. And they rearranged the entire house to make sure there were TVs in every room. And as soon as it went live, people started asking questions. How large is the TV in this room, in that room? It's ridiculous, but it's the truth.
Okay, I don't know if that was getting off topic. All of that, though, does really add to the property and will help your ROI and return on investment. There's really different ways to evaluate how to look at your return. Michael mentioned earlier that agents would call him asking for rental projections. Clients maybe narrowed it to 2 or 3 properties, wanting to see which ones would rent better. You've got what we call cash on cash return, meaning chances are you got to put 20% down. So let's just say I'm going to use some numbers. You're putting $200,000 down, whatever these numbers are. Somebody's going to look at saying, okay, I'm putting $200,000 down. What is my return on that cash? That's one way to look at it. Another way, people were looking at it based on the purchase price. And then I have other clients that look at all the costs. And I have a spreadsheet that I send to them where I put in the purchase price, the interest rate at whatever it is at that time, all the costs, the HOA fees, the utility fees if it's not a condo. And that's going to spit out a number. That's going to be your operating cost. And people want to know what that is. And then they look at kind of what their return is. And so there's no right or wrong. I'd also like to mention, and I tell this to all my clients, yes, it's about the rental income. What about the tax benefits? I am not an accountant. Talk to your accountant. There are some other tax benefits possibly that you can get to help with your ROI. Again, I'm going to stress to talk to your accountant. And then the usage, what is that worth to you? If you come peak week in the summer, and let's just say it's $5,000 a week, that's almost like you're staying for free because you're renting it out the rest of the time and somebody's paying your mortgage. Take those into consideration as well.
Yeah, we had owners that they stayed for an entire month in the middle of summer and that they didn't care that they were going to lose that much revenue. They just wanted to control the calendar. They wanted to know that they could rent an entire month in July on 30A and not spend $50,000 in rent. So for them, that was a huge benefit to be able to just do that. So there was that factor for them. And the one thing that I really didn't talk about is the fact that our market is seasonal in that we do have a winter. So there is the great weather time frame, which really kind of starts around spring break and then goes through fall breaks. But the school schedule is really the thing that dictates revenue. So that's the reason why you'll see a huge jump up in rents from the 3 to 5 weeks of spring break. Every year it's a little bit different. And then it drops off and tails off, even though the weather starts to get really good until you get into that late May timeframe when the southern schools start to actually go completely out of school. And then it changes once again as you go into August, as a lot of the southern schools are back in school starting the first week of August. So the rates actually will go down to try and catch some of that revenue. So our market is driven, as other markets are, by the school schedule. And that's, to Debbie's point, if you were to stay during one of those peak timeframes, it's a cost. You just look at it as like, okay, this is a cost. This is going to take away from my ROI, but I get to control the calendar. I get to say when I come. And that during the pandemic changed a lot because all of a sudden there wasn't a school schedule. So some of these properties were able to do unbelievable revenue because all of a sudden kids didn't have a regular school schedule. So people were coming between spring break and summer and all the way through, straight all the way through the fall up until even Thanksgiving. So for a period of time, the revenue looked amazing because there was like this epic time frame where there wasn't a traditional calendar, and adults were actually able to work more remote. We've gone back to a more normalized schedule. So a lot of times I would say, like, if you look at 2018, 2019 revenues, and then probably look at 23 revenues, those are going to be more normal than what happened during the pandemic.
Yeah. And I think that certainly the pandemic changed a lot of things for a lot of people. And some people are still a bit more remote. And if they homeschool kids, they may come in off season. Just know, again, there's so many different ways to evaluate ROI. And how you do it is, again, there's no right or wrong. Everybody's different. And where you purchase a property, Destin, Panama City Beach, 30A, again, there's no right or wrong. It is lifestyle, budget, and then a lot of things that we talked about. Some are going to be more important to you than others. And it's really just a matter of finding the right property.
Yeah, I can go into really deep weeds. I'm not going to on the 3 or 4 or 5 bedroom. The difference is one's one person. Sometimes they could be two moms, and other times it's 3 moms. And what happens is as you start to get past the 1 and the 2 bedrooms, you get into a scenario where it absolutely is tied to a school schedule because it's the moms getting together, talking about when is Joey off, when is Jill off, and trying to figure out when they can accommodate everybody's schedule to get together. And it gets worse as you get up into the 4s and the 5s. We had 7s and 10 bedrooms. So when you get to that point, now you're talking about spring break, summer, and fall breaks. And those big houses, for the most part, will stay largely unbooked compared to their 1-2 bedroom counterparts in off season, simply because you need all the kids off at the same time in order to get that big house booked. So there is a difference in revenue of what a 1 bedroom will look like on an annual basis versus, a 10 bedroom. And there's no right or wrong. Back to Debbie's point, lifestyle, what your needs are for your family. But there is a massive difference between those two if you're looking at things strictly from an investment standpoint.
I hope this was helpful. And I know that there's so many moving parts. So feel free to reach out to us through the show notes will be our contact info. And just know if you're, when you're looking for a property, make sure you get rental projections, or better yet, rental history if there is a history. And don't be afraid to ask questions. In another podcast, we are going to go into the ins and outs of the different rental companies. Just make sure that you're asking questions and know really ahead of time what everything looks like.
Yeah, it's difficult. This is not one of those podcasts. We talked about it earlier, like, what are the top 5 things that lead to ROI? And as you heard through this entire time frame, there's so many intricacies within each community, within each circumstance. What you really truly need is someone to guide you through all of that because there's so many moving parts. And that's really what we've had to deal with over almost 20 years that we've been here right now is guiding investors through that journey. And that's pretty much what we've done.
The next podcast, we're going to talk about colors and decor, which that should be a fun one. And that's also going to play into the ROI because you got to keep your property up to date. We'll tell you some tips and tricks next time about what we have seen and what we feel rents better in this market. Again, not necessarily a ski market, but in the beach market. And again, feel free to reach out if you have questions and just educate yourself, and then you know what you're getting into.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up because that actually does impact the ROI. So we're going to delve further into that on the next podcast. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. And till next time.